The wardens are gone. We are prisoners no more, looting in the streets, rioting, mass murder, and I am missing the whole thing. I really want to get out of the house now, but the train lines are down and it's a bloody hike and a half to get to the city. I suppose that I can carry on talking here, but not for too long. I'm the closest thing Killington has to a hero, and somebody's bound to get some ideas what with the wardens gone, even if we are far from their jurisdiction. So, business as usual. Thanks for tuning in, dear listeners, and welcome to Vermont Stretch Radio, brought to you live from Killington, Vermont, of Earth Gimel. We've got ski slopes and as many skiers as the wardens have headquarters. I am sure that all of you are wondering who the brave capes that displaced or, fingers crossed, destroyed the leadership of the wardens were. And well, it was the Fallen! I take back everything I said about them, and then I say it again. The Fallen are a bunch of knobs who use religion as a thinly veiled excuse to justify doing the sort of thing the S9 used to do, except on a larger scale. By the Fallen, I refer to one of the three families of the Fallen, each based on one of the three original of the 7 total Endbringers. Wait, sorry, that sounds a bit wrong. Behemoth, Jormungandr, Ziz, Konsu, Tohu, Bohu, 6. The first 3 of a total 6 Endbringers. Sorry, listeners. It was the Crowley family, the ones that had decorated themselves in the style of Leviathan, that, using a series of Tinkertech weapons, tore open the portals of Earth Gimel's megacity. The Crowleys, as led by a man that plays 52 pickup with human bodies, a girl that makes Mexican waves, and some other cape whose power could be construed as having some vague sort of thematic connection to Leviathan. But following the assault on the Fallen compound by the Wardens and the Undersiders and the C-list capes of Hollow Point, following the mass of arrests that ensued, it had been assumed that the danger the Fallen posed had passed. No such luck, dear listeners. There are 3 families of Fallen after all, and dealing with occultists doesn't mean that their fellow Fallen are dealt with. The public rested easy until across the city fight after fight broke out, heroes desperately attempting to intercept the Fallen that were moving to open the portals. And they failed. Just let that sink in for a moment, listeners. Our heroes failed. They lost. So, what is the long-standing impact of this? Well, for one, the portals are now big enough to be seen from wherever you are in the city. This gives the entire horizon a beautiful effect, this one of torn worlds rather than the gold-stained clouds of sunlight reflected from all those office buildings that were being built instead of apartments. And for another, the Wardens' headquarters is no longer in our dimension. And best of all, Brockton Bay has been cut in half. Let's see them bounce back from that one. Speaking of the Wardens, actually, we are now moving to other, more pressing news. Employment news. Capes are continuing to be refused entry onto the various teams of heroes. And for people determined to carry on the good work of the Protectorate, the Wardens and their associated teams sure are being a little bit picky. Sorry, that should have been the past tense. Ooh, I love the past tense. The Wardens sure were being picky. I mean, really? Didn't they want to be the monolithic entity behind all heroes? It's fair enough, but with all the hero teams like the Advance Guard and such being that little bit picky themselves, what happens when they all turn down someone? What happens when they turn down a guy who triggered from a job interview? What happens when they turn down some kid that goes on to scalp a dozen people with the power that they thought was only good for peeling potatoes? Say what you want about the good old PRT, but at least they knew to keep capes off the streets. In election news, Joanne Ween continues to be our top pick for the... Ooh, wait, I think we've actually already endorsed her today. Oh well, I still heartily encourage you to vote for her and heartily encourage you to tell me exactly how you're meant to spell and pronounce that name of hers. Finally, last little tidbit. In traffic news, the conflict with the Fallen and the subsequent terrorist bombings by the Fallen that have tore open almost every portal in the city have made the roads across most of the city a little bit hazardous. Capes are currently working to find a way to let people get around the gaping maws that have sectioned off entire swaths of the city. If your route goes past a portal, just assume that it's closed off. If your train line would pass between worlds, assume it doesn't anymore. There we have it. Done with today's news, up to date with the world as it is. Well, now is as good a time as any to return to the story of Nora James, a young woman whose life has not been so much shaped by the world of capes around her as it has been misshaped. Her parents were both employees of the PRT, a paramilitary organization ostensibly dedicated to trying to stop the villains of Earthbait. Why, if it wasn't for capes, young Nora wouldn't even exist. Unfortunately, capes are also the reason that young Nora was raised by a single parent, and the reason she has no parents anymore. Her father was crushed to death, a casualty of a cape fight. Her mother was very much a field agent. Life behind a desk would not suit her, and so Nora grew up alone. That's not to say that Kylie James was a bad mother by her daughter's testimony, but she wasn't a mother who could always be there for her offspring. The most time she'd ever been able to give her child was what paltry maternity leave her job afforded her. She had, or was able, to watch her daughter grow up without ever being a participant. What little the PRT provided in maternity leave was of course compensated for by the childcare they provided, and for the first 5 years of her life, Nora was raised by a chain of strangers, rotating childcare specialists, you see, to protect the children of any capes that might have been raised alongside young Eleanor James. It never occurred to her until later that her mother was still risking her life on a near daily basis, that Kylie James still acted as though nothing had changed when a single bad day would see her daughter growing up alone in the full sense. When Nora was old enough, she found herself spending her nights at home. She started school and started summer camps, anything to make sure that her mother didn't have to spend a full day with her. There were no family holidays, no family visits, just words and stories that her mother shared over dinner. Things that young Nora latched onto as the only connection between the two of them. She took parahuman studies. She worked out. She took self-defense, all in the hope that one day she would be able to help people like her mother did. In this same hope that one day it might somehow bring her the connection that they never had. But her mother never seemed to notice. Her mother was always on the front lines, always helping others that weren't her daughter. Which brings us to the end of our tale. 2 years ago, a fair few miles away from the Killington of Earthbait, but not far enough for poor PRT Officer James. Nora, this is a public confession. You know how you thought your mother was killed by Scion? Yeah, your mother wasn't killed by Scion. It was me. Sorry. She's outside the booth now, actually. Just sort of staring at me. She seems to be taking it well enough, but I should probably go talk to Ms. James. So, wrapping things up, I want to give a huge shout out to Splatterhorse, formerly the Protectorate Cape Diomedes. It seems she wasn't allowed to keep her name when she went independent, and had recently decided that the advertising executive who told her as much wasn't allowed to keep his head. And another shout-out to Brain King, arrested after my last shout-out to them revealed that they weren't quite following the terms of their probation. Sorry for that, Brain King, but they were released from custody today after their restraints and guards were both bisected by an expanding portal. Good to hear. Well, I am off now, listeners, so find something you want and then take it. Anarchy! Gorn metal! Shorter working days! This was a fan production for Parahuman Audio community content. Vermont Stretch Radio imagines what the news might sound like in the world of Ward, a story by J.C. McCrae. Worm, Ward, and the Parahuman series are all owned and written by him, and you can check them out at parahumans.wordpress.com and parahumans.net. For the Ward audiobook project, or the Wardiobook project, and for more community content like this, visit parahumanaudio.com.